Hello, everybody. Today is October 27th, 2022. It's a distribution team demo. Today, I'm going to talk about working on the Amazon Linux 2022 image decomposition. And as a side thing to that, I ended up following up from our previous demo on the worktree scripts. The scripts that targeting the Git work trees that I've finally just published and added some documentation to them for the folks who are interested in that. So yeah, with that being said, let me quickly run through the work tree tools because this is how I kind of prepare all of my working environments. So let's see. Let me open the browser. Damn it. New window. All right. So let's do this. And let me try to take that Zoom stuff out of the way. GitLab.com. So all there is, because I work using Z Shell, it was mainly geared at get a Z Shell. So if you are not Z Shell user, Bash is possible. I actually did a little bit of work there, and some of the Z Shell is going to be probably appropriate to this as well. So all it is like a bunch of scripts that just operate with a work tree. So we can create the work tree from the specified branch. You can work on the fork and a couple of other things. So really, really quickly, nothing fancy about this. So those are the work trees that I work with currently for GitLab build images, for example. So if I wanted just to go, so work tree go live demo, warning, may actually not work exactly the way I expected to. But boom, and I just go to the branch that I wanted to go. Or if I go work tree, go root, I return to my master. And also what I can do is do work tree open. Let's not do open, let's do create. And it just automatically changes directory to the work tree because it was already created for me. So this is as simple as that. So basically all it does, it just takes the base clone and then it adds dot and the branch name at the end. So you can work with all the branches simultaneously. And with our workflow, I think this is quite handy to use work trees because otherwise you can go nuts on the disk space. So that pushed to the side, that's enough of the work tree stuff. So you want to check it out, check it out. You want to ask me questions, ask me later. The main course of this conversation was working on the Amazon Linux 2022 builder image. And that's where I kind of stepped into a few complications. I found out that, well, Amazon Linux 2022 had an incompatible OpenSSL version, and thanks to DJ's prompt today, turns out we already done something similar with the Jammy, where we actually are building OpenSSL within the image. But I figured since I'm there, I might as well go all the way out and decompose that image into something slightly more manageable, even though it may not look it, but actually for the purposes of debugging and other things, I believe this is way more manageable than our previous composition of single liners, just to kind of cut down on the layers. So the end result here is a 2-layer image because there are 2 copies in there. And if we really wanted to down it to 1 layer, we'll just have to do like the intermediate step and copy everything into that layer and then copy the entire layer over. Ugly, so I didn't want to do that. So 2 layers should be fine. So why do I think, at least why do I do this, decomposing things into like a standalone commands instead of like one chained command? Is that because of this? So for example, when something goes wrong in your image, and I'll just do something like this. I'll just add one more command here and let it fail, right? So let's rebuild this image. And clearly, boom, failed. Now I want to troubleshoot it. So easiest thing to do is do docker run it rm and get that image. And you write in that step right before you did any of that. So now you have your work there has changed, and you write before you executed this command. So now you can manually go and execute that command if that failed. If you're running this, you can't do that. You can't just jump in the middle of that command line and execute make install if everything else has succeeded before that. So I consider that to be like a big benefit, especially when you're debugging. Not to mention, you kind of better utilizing the caches while you're developing. It really is convenient for developing, probably not as much convenience when it's already in production, but then again, does it really matter? And then the other thing that I don't know how familiar everybody is with stage builds. And this is something that I really like. That is, you can build images within those stages. So first thing here, I'm creating the builder base, and I'm installing all those development tools initially. And then next, I'm just using that builder base twice to build OpenSSL and to build Ruby as 2 separate entities. And I'm not using the buildx right now. There's something odd with my Fedora and the buildx. But if you're using buildx, the multiple stages can run in parallel unless they're interdependent. Like, for example, here, when I'm clearly defining that I need to copy from builder OpenSSL, so the builder Ruby will wait for the builder OpenSSL to complete. So you can actually copy the files over into the image. So this is how I wanted to decompose those 2 things. And the other interesting note on, because there was, at some point in time, somebody mentioned that there's a potential, if we're doing copy / from some image into the current image, it'll be doubling the layers. Actually not, because at least with the Docker, and I think Podman as well, they do the analysis of how this layer has been changed, and it records only the changes in the layer. So it's not doubling the layers. It's the same thing over. It will notice that just certain files have changed, and that will be that extra layer, not the whole thing. So the size is not different at all. It's the layers that you have and the convenience of you. Like, for example, this stuff, we could really get rid of it, like the RM, because why? We don't need to clean it up because the next layers are not going to be using any of that, because we're going to be copying. And I'm using here, with the OpenSSL, I was supposed to use this, just there equals. So if we use the dest-dir for the make, which is typical for the autoconfig stuff, then the deployment is going to happen into that directory as if that directory was root. So everything was going to go in there. So later, when we're copying stuff from there, we can just copy it into root. So we'll place them in the proper directories. So that's kind of like really fast run through what I have done, and I would love to hear what you guys think about this, since it's a demo.
I do like the approach of running each command in its own run, so it's easier to debug. That definitely is going to be nicer.
Yeah, and plus you can use environment variable stuff, so I like it.
Like, is there anything, like, can anybody think of a reason why we shouldn't do this? And that this is because I'm biased, right? I'm honestly biased towards this. So if I'm blindsided by something, I would love to hear whether this approach is flawed in one way or another.
Yeah, I think if you're using build stages, then basically all intermediate stuff goes away, right? So I can't see anything.
Yeah, that was my thought too on this.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows us to get things even slimmer. Like, for example, here, for building of OpenSSL, we need the Perl find bin, which is not needed at runtime. It's just used by the autoconfig to do the configuration. That's it. And the same thing for building the Ruby. We need those to develop packages, which we don't need afterwards because those gems are being built and we don't need them anymore. So I wanted to kind of yank things out, make them as small as possible, and not provide any additional tools if we don't need to.
Yeah. The only thing I see that would be beneficial to this, and I find myself doing it on occasion, trying to factor it into other things we have, is get more diagnostic output during the build. So like tell, just even a couple echo statements during the build, like saying, building with OpenSSL version this and Ruby version this.
Right.
That way, if you're going back and looking at things, you're not trying to decipher what was the value of that variable really.
Right.
None of the build stuff ever tells you what it, and even if you're looking at our pipeline output, it just used the variable name. It doesn't expand it to the actual value, which drives me absolutely insane.
That's right. Yeah. Makes sense. So in theory here, it does kind of hint you about the versions used, but yes, this is not very descriptive, right? It's like, what is this? Yeah, but it is a little bit above. So you could theoretically kind of find that.
Right, but that could also be overridden.
That's right.
By a build param or something, and our pipeline, it'll just show you the command line it used.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that that parameter is actually there. It might be a variable.
Right. Yeah.
So it'd be nice during the build to actually have diagnostic output that just tells us more. And I think that's just something we need to do on a regular basis as we build things to do that more readily.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's valuable. We can, and especially because we're doing the multi-staged Docker file, we can allow ourselves to throw in the echoes.
Exactly.
And those go away anyway.
Yep.
It's not going to be an extra layer. Interesting. I'm kind of thinking, even in a normal situation without the multi-stage, I'm thinking that the echo is not going to result in an extra layer because there's going to be no artifacts on disk.
Correct. If you're doing it like you have it on the, if we're doing it like we have it on the right side there, where all the commands are appended, the echo is just there and gives us output.
Yeah.
Doesn't do anything beyond that. So either way, we should be doing more verbose. Again, I don't want it to be so verbose it's just overwhelming. I want to make sure that we're just giving out pertinent facts that are useful or that could be useful.
Right. Yeah. Anything that the DI is going to inject would be nice, right? So if it is overriding that stuff, it would be nice to know what happened.
Exactly. And I see that basically, the initial thought is things like what versions everything is, and if we're bringing in a specific item that's not normally brought in, that we should notate that in the build. But also when we push the images, that drives me another thing that's insane is that if I'm looking at a pipeline and trying to figure out what was just pushed, at best I get the SHA tag of the
Yeah,
but I don't know what I don't always know what name we pushed it as.
yes, that I can totally relate to because I just stepped on it multiple times in just the last week.
Yep. Yep.
So that'll be part of the pipeline, though. So
No, it
we'll
is.
have to deal with that.
Every once in a while, I get around to I should go put some of that stuff together and just get it into specifically CNG, but I just haven't made the time. Because
I'm
it
kind
has
of
been a
curious.
big enough issue at times sometimes.
Since we are talking about the multi-stage, like for example, this stage, it could be useful to cache it even. Like we could potentially try to cache it as in, because when you do Docker build, you can actually specify target. And you can say, I just want to build the builder base. And then you can tag it with a specific name and a tag and ship it into the registry. And then you can recycle that over and over. But again, I didn't go as far just yet. I was kind of looking for feedback, and especially that this change I wanted to contain just to this file rather than the entire pipeline changes just yet. But it's a nice opportunity to kind of gauge the input and figure out what does group think on this. Because those things, or like, for example, this, if we ever need OpenSSL for something else, again, we could theoretically cache it, recycle it. Unfortunately, the way we tag things is kind of harder to do that.
Yeah, I mean, because the problem is you do that update, right? It's going to change every time you build it.
Yeah.
You want it to update, but you want it to update, right? Every time you build it.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So caching probably won't help, will it? Or am I missing something?
Cache actually will help in the sense that, first of all, because if we have this format rather than this, that means that all those multi-lines, if we prefetch the cached image, and then we try to build, it will see that, oh, wait, I already have those layers. I don't have to do any of this, so I can just do, the rest of the steps like we do with the rest of it. Actually, does anybody know if I did not look at the pipeline, but I'm kind of getting the feeling that we are prefetching the cache when we're building those images. No, we don't?
Not in this project.
Okay.
So
okay.
which is why I think this probably changes is probably pretty easy to go into this project right away because we're not losing any cache versus
Gotcha.
CNG where we still need to solve the caching in between layers, right?
Right. Okay, makes sense.
But yeah, in this repo, I don't think we're the test builds we aren't even pushing. I think at the end, like we build it and we don't even push it. In this particular repo, it's only the.
I think we do. It's just this is the builder.
This isn't builder. This is build.
Oh.
So
okay.
the test images.
Yeah, because we tag them oddly, in my opinion, because we have the base name for the entire build image, the GitLab build images, and then colon, and then the name of the image itself, versus having the image name and then have the version attached at the end. So we don't have the flexibility of kind of rolling through them or doing any creative stuff, unfortunately. But otherwise, I take it that there are no general objections for me pursuing that direction. I will wait for the other folks from the team to kind of raise their opinion. Plus, it's going to be in MR, so there's going to be a chance for the maintainers to take a look at it. But do take a look at it. I don't think I'm fully done. I'm gonna look into more optimization and removing things that are unnecessary there, and kind of getting it as tight as possible and making it a nicer multi-stage build. And then we can take a look at, whether we want to actually cache the intermediary results. Because like I said, I don't see why wouldn't we cache this if we ever use the same thing someplace else in another image.
Yeah, we might move these to a different repo before we do that. Because this repository isn't really actually a distribution repository. Most of the images in this are actually for the upstream like Rails projects to run their CI pipelines.
Oh, okay.
And these aren't the ones that we use to build Omnibus. These are the ones we use to test Omnibus. But we put the repo is called build, and we put them there. But the Omnibus images in here we control. So like we can do this, but changing the CI to incorporate cache or something like that, that's probably more engineering productivity specifically for this repo.
That's interesting. We do use one image for building, though, the operator one. Because that one I know specifically was done for building, because it incorporates all the tools that we need for building of the operator. But otherwise, yeah, it's funky.
Yeah. And then over in CNG, which is really where more of these changes would be even more beneficial. I know Hossein has been also looking at how can we cache these layers. So we're already broken, because at least the UBI ones are using multi-stage builds already. So we've already kind of broken our cache for some of the pipelines. So yeah, definitely getting those multi-stages cached, which aren't at the moment for CNG, is going to be very helpful.
Oh, and if we are ever to incorporate those stages back into cache, from my past experience, maybe things have changed by now, but the Docker build is unable to properly incorporate the caches. It just takes one cache and that's it. And the build X actually can take all the caches, but you have to properly order them. I stepped on that landmine before, so something to look forward to. But it is possible to effectively use the caches. It's just that we will have to switch all of our builds to the build X. That's another thing that we need to look at. And from what Hossein was saying about the multi-arc builds, he's leaning towards doing the build X as well. So in the end, we may just have to go that way, despite my bias towards Podman.
Yeah, and on the like single line runs versus multi-line runs, I think for the most part it really has been a combination of legacy in these projects, before the multi-stage builds were as stable as they are today, and the cache being a little bit of a factor. Though you'll see when you get into the builder images specifically in that repo, not the build images, but the builder images, we kind of did like an in-between hack where the final step, I think we always copy from scratch and then copy just the whole image over to flatten the layers.
Right.
We do like a hack like that. So we could probably, if we haven't already, even in those projects, because we're doing that hack, we could probably return to single line runs as well.
Right.
I looked this up before, and I know you're supposed to want to reduce the layers, but I've never seen a good explanation of why. I mean, I guess it's supposed to save space, but I've never seen an explanation of how it saves space. Does anybody know?
It's not just save space. Okay, save space does work because, like, for example, if you create the file in one layer, you delete it in the other layer, the file is still present. So that space has not been freed. But if you collapse them, all of a sudden that space shrinks. But also it's the lookup, because what happens is at the runtime, whenever you try to look up a file, it has to go through all the layers trying to locate where that file is located. And the more layers you have, the slower that that goes.
Okay.
And again, with multiple layers, the load time for the container slows down and everything. So it's mostly the runtime thing. It does affect the runtime quite a bit. So straight like squashing them into a single layer always
think
works out well.
Yeah, I think it's actually even worse than that because I think it has to look through all the layers no matter what it found. So that if it, if it starts looking through the layers for a file and finds it on layer 2, it has to continue looking through the rest of the layers to find out if that file had changed or anything else. So
Yeah,
every lookup is not a huge, but it's a performance hit.
Yeah, depending if it saves the entire file or just the delta, because if the delta, then yes, absolutely, you'll have to reapply the whole thing, the whole chain, which is a computational and memory issue right there. So in general, through all the conversations I've had, people have reported that squashing images has resulted in a much more stable and robust systems.
Downloads a little faster too most of the time.
All right, let me stop sharing at this point. I think that should conclude our demo for today. And I will ask whoever has the button to stop recording to stop it.
Hey, Dimitri, could you post the link to your work tree scripts?
It's in the notes.